COVID-19. And also when you have these thieves, these banking thieves that are in America more than anywhere else, draining this country and getting it ready for an economic depression, what better thing to have a virus and blame it on a virus? And also, what better thing to do something that could once and for all shut down a whole bunch more small businesses, which is the lifeblood of America, and make it ever more dependent on those huge corporations that now have massive amount of influence through money. And why do they have that influence? Because they have brainwashed us to fear and hate socialism and communism. It's all tied together. We hate that, so we never look into it. We don't understand it. We just hate it. We never look into how it's been sabotaged, on and on and on. Well, that protects these thieves at the top, because they convince us, oh, they're just better than us. That's why they have all this. Oh, the CEO that makes 1,000 times more than the worker at the bottom, that's because he's 1,000 times more worthy. It's a meritocracy. Peons, so just go about your business. Anyways, us are half of our populace hating these things, as I once did as a Republican, without even knowing what it was. It protects those guys at the top, and that's why they had us hated, because it was communists that had a huge... Hey, stop, don't turn it off. I'm just going to ask you, keep an open mind. Give me a second. So that was from my last video of current events. The video that's going to come after this is also of current events. And I just want you to remember that saying that the victors write the history. And you can go back in history and you can see examples of that, like Napoleon was head of a successful republic, had the rights of man, was doing all these good things. But before that was the French Revolution, where all these parasitic people connected to the monarch had their heads chopped off. And the other royal families of Europe saw that, and they didn't want that emulated in their country. They saw that as a really big threat, including the banksters. And so they did what they could to destroy Napoleon, in fact, once and for all. But you got to look at that saying even more abstract than that, because today there are winners, and they have been winners for generations. I'm talking about the banksters and the industrialists. And they too have influenced the curriculum from the beginning, from the inception of public education. You can go to Michael Perenni and read the books, read the actual source documents of these guys discussing why they should have public education. It was not for the greater good, the good of the people. It was to indoctrinate them. Just want you to understand that what really happened is not always what got wrote about. It's what those in power with the money and the influence printed. That's what we've generally learned. They didn't really want to talk about what they did or even themselves, because they didn't want anyone looking at them. There has been years of a class war, and that's the thing. In this class war, they have won, and they make it so we don't even know there is a class war. And even what's happening today with you know what is part of that class war. But they have been writing the history books. So they can sabotage things and then write it in a certain way that whole part of the sabotage was kept out. So I just ask you to keep an open mind. I was a Republican before. I believed in those things, and only reading the books of my enemies in order to, what I felt were my enemies, in order to better deconstruct their arguments, did my eyes open up. And I'm not a sheep. My analytical IQ, at least last time it was measured, was incredibly high, above 99.5% of the population. I'm not a sheep. This stuff is real, so I just ask you to keep an open mind and listen. All right, all the best. Take care. Greetings and good day, everyone. So I'm going to touch on a few things today. Obviously, America's in crisis. I could talk about a whole bunch of things. I'm sure everyone watching this, if you're in America, senses that, if not everywhere around the world. And it's gotten worse. Depression has been on the rise since 2013. But more recently, post-COVID, these lockdowns, which further isolate people and also put them at greater risk of financial insolvency, it's gotten to the point to where, well, they did a survey, and from people 18 to 25, it was 25% who seriously, or it was like 24.5, seriously considered committing suicide at the time it was taken in the last 30 days. That is horribly substantial. And from the ages above like 25 to 44, it was 16%, and that's still rather substantial. And I know it's crossed my mind, just going through different things. Times are hard. And so that's one reason why we need to be more empathetic, come together. And also, that's the only way anything's going to change. They divide, they rule. If we stop pointing at each other, the Democrats against the Republicans, Republicans against the Democrats, start coming together on common ground issues and surrounding, literally, not figuratively, traditional centers of power. I'm talking about protesting, all that, going to those places and literally surrounding them, camping out. That's the only way change is coming, and approaching these lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, together, so they know that we're not divided. That's the only way they're going to listen to us. If not, they can keep playing us on the other group, because if you only listen to one side of the media and you're not quite awake, or the other side, they tend to paint the picture that it's all the other side's fault, and that's absolutely not the case. It's both of their fault. And anytime on either side that they vote for the lesser of two evils, you have to understand that these parties have the same owners. So they can play you like that because they own both the two top candidates, like in the presidential debate or the presidential race. Now, it might not be all groups owning all of them, but the majority of the powerful groups own both of them, one way or another. So that's another reason why we shouldn't fight amongst each other, because that's how they play us. It'll never end. Only way, come together, start approaching these traditional centers of power. Don't go riot. Don't go destroy businesses. That's what they want you to do, because then they can come down with police power. When they see a certain group of people doing it, the other group can say, I'm better than that, so now I'll never do that. So then it stops the other group from ever participating in those things. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. I'm better than that. I can't go protest or whatever. So all those things are favorable to the established order, to the imperialists, to the banksters. They want a certain group that can be demonized to go riot, destroy buildings, and then again, we're more divided, blaming another group. And then another good thing they can do for themselves is label that group communist, even pay some of them and train some of the ignorant ones to say they're Marxist, even though they have no idea what that means. And then that gets spread around, media, social media, and then the other side, the Republicans, say, see, it's a communist conspiracy and we need to protect ourselves from that. None of these people even know what communism is, what Marxism is, and what it's evolved to. All it was again, a critique of capitalism. And who doesn't want self-reflection as an entity? Those that want to keep something unbalanced and in their favor. It's the rulers. So they demonize communism. If you take economics courses, go look at the funders of your courses. It's going to be like the Bill Gates Institute, or Bill and Melinda Gates Institute. It's going to be one of the Koch brothers Institute. It's going to be all these old money, allegedly philanthropic institutions. But what they're doing is giving you one side of a narrative. It's a false narrative. It's a made up fantasy land. Like read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and you'll understand that what they tell you in there, it at least has some BS. Now there are some principles in there that you can use in everyday life, but it's completely distorted. So if you have an economics degree, sorry, you probably got ripped off. You got indoctrinated on, hopefully not, but possibly on your own dime. At least with some of those courses, they offer those things in college for free, so you don't have to buy a book. But that's how they draw, good instructors, good professors into it. Oh yeah, this one is free. But anyways, even if it's not, the Koch brothers, it's fully infiltrated. So people getting these degrees have no real idea what's going on if they took those degrees in a sort of knowledge information vacuum. If that's the only source of information they were getting, their view is highly skewed. So let's talk about COVID. Right now, we are allowing to have the creation of gods. Let me get back to you. I gotta check where I'm going. We are allowing the creation of gods. What do I mean about that? Well, first off, it's been going on for a long time, and those in the know have known that there was going to be a big economic collapse. Whose fault was it? The banks, the banksters, the Federal Reserve. But they've also masked it with QE. They've pumped money into the stock market. They've bought mortgage-backed securities, done these things to pump up the stock market. And, oh, look, the stock market's doing good. But anyways, what they're doing is they're enriching the already rich. And the Fed has been caught lending money to banks on the sly. The thing is, they're all connected. The banks created the Fed back in like 1914. You can read The Creature of Jekyll Island. It's a non-governmental private institution, and it's purported that it's there to stop inflation, but it has inflated the dollar, I believe, 99% since its inception, the Federal Reserve's inception. So they have drained America, and we don't understand how much this has happened because most of us can't quite grasp the fact that automation has allowed resources and other things to be extracted easier. Worker productivity has risen since the 70s, but the amount of money we've gotten for our work has not. All that excess capital has gone to the very top. And then now you have the Federal Reserve massively increasing the dollars in supply, pumping up the stock market. And so when these investors, these ultra rich guys, people start pulling this money out, inflation becomes very, very problematic, possible inflation. And there already is inflation. There's a lot of inflation, but it's going to get substantial. And that's why you see Bitcoin shooting up. And Bitcoin might be allowed to get us used to using cryptocurrency, especially for Americans, because we seem a little bit more resistant than the other Anglo Empire countries, you know, the Five Eyes countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, and us. Over there, already there's more draconian things happening. You have concentration camps, basically COVID concentration camps, lockdowns and all that, mandatory testing. It's more substantial there, and that's probably because right here, you know, they can use their AI computer systems to see what they think the American population will accept, or they can run studies, and it's probably more dangerous here than the other countries. And we have a substantial amount of guns. We could take the government down anytime we wanted, like very easily, even if the military was not on our side, if we had some organization, because we outnumber all of them substantially. I'm just talking about registered gun owners, like a huge number. So they know that, and they don't want anything to kick off. And that's another reason why they can do riots, and why they might have agent provocateurs go in there and break windows and deliver bricks to make it so, again, a isolated group is demonized, and then everyone else points at them, and then cognitive dissonance kicks in and makes them think, I'll never be like that. So now they are unwitting supporters of the status quo. They've been manipulated into thinking these thoughts and creating this division inside of their minds, making them think that they are substantially different than the other people. And there may or may not be differences, but for the most part, we have more in common with each other, especially as Americans, than we do not have in common. And of course, there's things like class and education that can further the divide. But let's get into class, and I want to go over so I want to add that as a caveat, that when you say class, there is a class of wealth, but there's also a moral and intellectual class, and we shouldn't conflate those two classes. Now, there are some people that are in both classes. They're wealthy and they're intelligent, empathetic, they're genuinely good people. But that is not a rule, and that may in fact be the exception. It's just like a politician. Look at Biden. He's a sociopath. If you look at his record, if you look at his treatment of children, if you talk to someone that's an expert in those things in identifying predators, if you look at the crime bill that he helped put together, if you look at him being okay with war, preemptive war, which is a war crime under the Geneva Convention. If you listen to his speech on how he went to big corporations and said, I'll be your prostitute, and they told him, come back when you're older, you should be able to gather enough information that this guy is a sociopath. And look where he's at. He's at the head. He's at the head, and they stole the election, or attempting to steal the election for him, just like they did to Bernie Sanders. Especially on the Democratic side, because on the Democratic side, they play the other minorities. They play the racists. They're very racist, but they don't talk racist, generally speaking. So they're even more corrupt. At least people on the Republican side to just not have all the information. They can really think they are right, that they have some sort of moral conviction. But a lot of those on the Democratic side are just straight sociopaths, corrupt. But look, they're at the head of our government. That's a prime example of how these people are able to rise to the top, even though they're not intellectually superior. Joe Biden is intellectual lightweight, to say the least. As of now, it appears he has dementia. You know, out of the 330 million people in America, these are not the two most intelligent people that should be running our government and partially the world. Far from it. But these are two people that are willing to cooperate much more so Biden, with the powers that be, with the deep state, with the Zionists, with the special interests, with the big corporations, the corporatocracy, the banksters, the oil companies, the MIC, military-industrial complex. Those are the real rulers of our country. Everything else, the two people that they put in front of us to vote for, is a facade. It's a show. And, you know, they've already done studies, America, and found out that America is not a democracy. We're an oligarchy. So, yeah, I wanted to give that caveat when I say class. It doesn't mean that simply you're rich. So there are class differences. There are cultural, subcultural differences, but we still have more in common with each other. And there's a lot of things we can come together, common ground, like reducing military-industrial complex. If a conservative is for the military-industrial complex, he or she must realize that he is not a conservative. If he believes he or she is, then they are a hypocrite. Because you can't be okay with spending trillions on preemptive war and considering yourself wanting to conserve resources, because by definition, war is the most wasteful of endeavors. Use of resources pretty much imaginable. We have thousands of nuclear weapons. We've detonated thousands of nuclear weapons. People in Japan, and with other means Vietnam and the Marshall Islands, Bikini Islands, people are still suffering from various experiments, various uses of biological, or I should say chemical or nuclear weapons. So not only that, we destroy things that are built, we destroy. If that money was put into education, we could start thinking more clearly, think more efficiently. And then as we think more efficiently, we act more efficiently, and we pass that down to our kids. Everything could become more efficient if we really got a good education, if that money was put into education, into making us more intelligent. But in fact, the opposite has happened. That money goes into indoctrinating us and going into things like atmospheric aerosol injections, injecting nanoparticulate into the stratosphere in order to allegedly cool the planet, which also ends up in our hearts and minds. They found in the billions, and the smaller the metal, the more oxidative effect is on the cell. It's bringing our IQs down. It's making us more dumb. So that's another reason why we may be in crisis when it comes to other countries. And sure, China's participating with them in geoengineering, but probably not to the extent we are, because we are the head of the empire. They need us. They need the most populated areas in America to believe that, climate change, global warming isn't that bad. And, they hide the information that the single biggest polluter of greenhouse gas is our military. Let's talk about wasteful. So anyways, you cannot be a conservative and be pro-military in real life. So you need to just think right there. If that's what you believe you are, come to reckoning with yourself and understand you've been played. And same with the Democrats. They act like, oh, we're the better ones. We're for all the people. But the Democrats go to war too. It shows that you don't care about all people. You just care about yourself, about your group. You want your group to do better. And then you say, oh, you're better than the Republicans. They're racist. You don't care about people. You're okay with going into Libya and destroying the richest country in Africa and creating a slave state where there's warfare and open slavery markets. So same thing. If you're a Democrat, don't think you're better than a Republican. Because in essence, actually, both sides only care about themselves. And they're both okay with war. Democrats have a lot of corrupt, fake people. Bernie's in there. He's not a fake person, but he is a fake Democrat. That's sort of an exception, but not really, because he's not even really a Democrat. So that's why we should just come together as a people, or that's one of the reasons. We see that how far we've been misled, and we have other common ground issues as well, besides military-industrial complex. I'm sure we could all agree that we could cut out some middlemen like insurance companies, or maybe not, but we could all agree on a better system somehow. Some people are just so programmed to think that everything government is bad that they want to keep those middlemen. But hey, my friends, look at China. China has a lot of state-owned industries, and they're booming and doing very well. So it's BS. They've lied to you. They sabotage those industries in order to privatize them. It's not true. You can have a well-run, state-owned company organization. We could agree that there should be more competition within the drug market. Prescription drugs, possibly. To where they don't have just a couple people, and we could a couple companies selling these things. We could also agree that they shouldn't be able to use tax money to come up with these medications and then use an offshore tax haven to sell them to us. If they use tax money, we should own it, really, or we should own a substantial part of it. These companies are so corrupt. Even Ben Swan reported that Moderna filed for a patent for a coronavirus and cited in the paperwork a possible intentional release of coronavirus. This was 9 months prior to the outbreak. I mean, again, we are allowing to there be the creation of gods where there's so much wealth they can corrupt and threaten anyone and are above the law, and also can work with the banksters, the people that own the media. You think it's rational for the people that own so much, including the media, to influence the message thereof. They're not just going to let it go on its own and start attacking them. And there's logical safeguards that as well, where if the media starts going against people that own stock or are on the board of certain companies or a class of people, they're not going to give funding, give advertising to those people. Since Trump took office, the stock market's gone up 40%. And a lot of that is basically funny money, the Fed pumping it in. So the people that have millions of dollars in stocks, they just saw a 40% increase. So if they had $1 million, they got 1.4 million. They are draining us. That's our money. And COVID is a smokescreen. The billionaires have all gotten richer since COVID. The average millionaire has $1 million more, the average millionaire, since the beginning of COVID. They are creating two classes of people, literally the haves and the have-nots, and the haves will support the system and the have-nots will be blamed for their own misery. COVID is a smokescreen for them draining those at the very top that likely have trillions of dollars, like the old families, the people that actually own the slaves in America and were responsible for the slave trade. It said that like 1.6 of American population owned slaves, and the vast majority of that was only a few thousand families at the time of the Civil War. These people are likely still rich, and it's those people that should pay reparations, not all white people. My ancestors didn't have slaves, so why should we? But that's another divisive point that they can push. It's controlled opposition. So now there's a wedge between white and black. And the idea that those families that have inherited wealth, that built some of that wealth on slavery, the very few 1% actually having to pay reparations, is kept out of the discourse completely. Again, because those are the people that own the media. The people that own the slaves own the media. So don't blame all of us. Blame them. And we have a common enemy. All of the good, regular, working people of America, of the world, have a common enemy, a group of exploiters that have been operating and exploiting for literally hundreds of years, with wealth passed down while they fed us this narrative of a meritocracy that is completely empirically false. When you look at the numbers of our country with other countries tracked by last names, it is false. So anyways, that's all I wanted. That's the main point I wanted to make, is that COVID is the smokescreen and they are bleeding us dry. If we don't remember that it's the banksters and the oil men that have destroyed the planet and pushed our military around the world and pushed money into defense, and if all we do is see COVID and our inept leaders, we are letting the criminals pull off the crime. These people need to be held accountable for their crimes, generations of crimes. Crimes beyond the scope of the average person. When they pump these nanoparticulates into the atmosphere and make us dumber, all of our decisions are going to be dumber. Like, all of our life is going to be less efficient. We're not going to remember things. We're going to forget things. We're going to argue more because we can't see the other person's perspective as easily. I mean, this is the worst degree of sabotage they could have inflicted, and that's what war is as well, and that's what the bankster complex is as well, because they put this fake money into the system and charge us interest on it. And if I give you $5 and charge you 20% interest, you'll never have that $6 to pay it off, because all you have is the $5, and it's been enslaving us for over 100 years. And these people and these families need to pay. They need to be held accountable. They need to go away. That's it. Have a wonderful day.